Hey there, Skullheads. I'm Snags.
And I'm Old Silky.
I'm Eric. They call me E.
Yeah, so we got a special guest E on here. Our topic this week is we're going to be laying down the gospel on the history of hip hop. And E grew up in New Jersey, right across the water from all that stuff as it was happening. So he's going to have a good perspective on it, and we'll jump in. But first, Old Silky is going to pimp the website.
Yeah, so go on snagsandsilky.com and buy up the merchandise. We've got t-shirts, mugs, stickers, hoodies. There's an original script called Sink or Swim on there. Check all that out.
And published as a Kindle book and written by some cranky old mofo named Cyrus Bunker. We have no idea who that is. It's not us, we promise.
No.
Yeah.
So that's all in there.
Yeah.
So tonight I wanted to just get deep and go back to the beginnings. Hip hop in today's culture is actually bigger than rock and roll, which could be debated, but it's just a fact. It's in every. I know E pointed this out to me, and it made a lot of sense that it's in movies, music, fashion. It's unified cultures. It's bigger. I think it's bigger than anything that even the founding hip hop guys could have even fathomed. That this would really take over popular culture the way it has over the last 40 years. And so I just wanted to kind of throw that out. But
well, if you look at it, like when it first kind of started evolving out of New York, there were different pillars of hip hop culture. You had graffiti, you had breakdancing, DJing, and rapping, which was originally called MCing, right? So that was already a pretty multidisciplinary deal.
Yeah. So E, did you see it like right at the beginning with like the Lost Poets and Kool Herc and that?
Like I said, for me growing up in New Jersey, we got a lot of radio stations between New York and Philly. So we were getting a lot of the late night party vibes and trying to figure out what was the new underground phase, because you were leaving out of that disco era, going into more of a R&B, but then rap just happened to just fall into place at the right time. Everything has a purpose in the place, and I believe at that time it just fell into place because you were listening to like Gil Scott-Heron and the Last Poets, and there was rhythmic patterns of beats with spoken words, more poetry to give you an introspect of what they were feeling at that time during that time during the mid to late 70s going into the early 80s.
Yeah, like early 71, Gil Scott-Heron had Whitey on the Moon, which I love that song, but or poem, really, where the rest of the world is freaking out. Oh, we got somebody landing on the moon, but meanwhile there's no jobs, and my sister's pregnant, and just it was a real like eye opener to who gives a shit about Whitey on the moon when we got problems down here on the street and in the neighborhood that are not being addressed, and that kind of thing. But like you mentioned, the disco thing, were you able to just in your crew or your crowd, were you able to relate to, say, Chic's Good Times?
Yeah, most of that is some of the basis for some of the actual original beats that you hear in the early hip hop, because that's where they were taking those loops from those albums
Right.
and elongating them to make the patterns that you hear later on that formed the basis of hip hop.
But that
So
whole style
basically,
was that too flashy? Like you like
Actually, if you think about it, it's pretty creative that you're listening to a song that you probably love, and like you said, just taking that good time speed and you hearing it, and then all of a sudden you get to that break, boom, 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 and then you go, I can do something with that, and then somebody, you had African Bambaataa, hip hop, hip it just the early beginnings. Somebody had to take the time and go, hey, what if we use that little break there and extend it, like Grandmaster Flash is great for that, and just extending that beat and just making it longer and longer. And then you add over lyrics over that to get a party started, to get something hopping.
um so
this is a documentary I was watching today, basically talking about Cool Herc, and that you have that song Apache, and there's a break in the middle of that, and by the Bongo Band or Incredible Bongo Band or whatever. And so basically, it was in Cool Herc. If you look at the conventional history of hip hop, Cool Herc is the original OG. Although there's some debate about some cats over in Queens and Brooklyn, and we'll get into that might have been around here. But Cool Herc is considered like the Robert Johnson of hip hop in a lot of ways. But so he had two turntables. He'd play the song Apache. You get to the break. The break was the most badass part. That's when everybody would start breakdancing. And then to elong it, he'd have the same record on the other turntable. And right as the break's about to end, he starts it on the other turntable. And that's what he's talking about. Just dragging that part of the song forever, basically.
Yeah, it's called bridging. That's what you call that technique. It's called bridging.
Okay. Now, did you see? So there's a story where Africa Bambaataa had formed Zulu Nation, and instead of these gang fights, fists and knives and stuff, they started these block parties and getting these gangs to have these little dance-offs and things instead of killing each other.
Yeah, you still got to look at the political times at that time. You're looking at, we just left the 60s, which were, going through that transition of still trying to get equality and put work, make everything even for everybody across the board. So when you're looking at that aspect, hip hop, what Bambaataa and everybody was trying to do was to try to bring some kind of cultural diversity so that you don't have to fight, but just have a normal conversation or make it something productive instead of trying to having to murder or kill somebody over something menial.
Right, and you're coming. South Bronx had been dilapidated. There were a lot of abandoned buildings.
Riot.
You had the energy crisis, right?
There's a famous baseball game where the Yankees are playing, and there's this giant fire in the background. If you look it up on YouTube,
that's where, like I said, there was a lot of racial tensions going on there. They were trying to move people out of that area so they can develop it. So what they were doing, like I said, unfortunately for a lot of people there at that time, they were trying to create a genocide to move out groups of Spanish, because in the Bronx, you'll be surprised how much diversity is in the Bronx. You got Puerto Ricans, you have Dominicans, along with blacks, you have Italian. So you have a whole diverse group. And if they were low class at that time, that was their way to trying to get landlords were intentionally
burning their buildings down,
to
collecting the insurance, right?
To clear out that area.
That's awful.
That's
awful. Well, So let's go back to E's beginnings. When did you kind of get into? Let's kind of hear your story,
Yeah,
just from
specifically,
curiosity.
how'd you get into DJing? Because you
Well,
yourself are
back
a DJ.
in well, like I said, back in the early '80s, my father used to DJ at some of the different Elks and American Legions, and he used to bring home his equipment and everything. And I would ask him if I can just listen to it just to see, because he was more into the jazz, blues, and everything. So listening to a lot of the older records, you get to a sense of how the, like I said, sense of what the vibe of the streets were. Because jazz gives you a certain vibe, blues gives you a certain vibe, gospel gives you a certain vibe. And growing up during that time, you start to appreciate music from in all different forms, even rock and roll. Because, like I said, most radio stations you had a blend of everything, so you weren't just listening to all R&B, you weren't
Right.
listening to all country. You had a blend of everything, and plus you had a lot of shows on TV at the time, like American Bandstand
Mhm.
and stuff like Soul Train. So you got a lot of diversity watching TV and listening to all different genres of music at the time.
And
So
it
I
was
was,
it was AM radio, so that was really all
yeah,
you.
a lot of was AM before FM became popularized. So like I said, you got a different variety of music. And where I grew up at, the diversity in that area, you heard a lot of different. So you heard some Frank Sinatra, you will hear some opera, you'll hear some gospel. So you got a preference
Latin.
of
Don't forget
a,
Latin music. I'm sure there's a lot of
yeah, a
Latin.
lot of Latin music. Yes,
But you
Be-
would listen to whatever was on, right?
yeah, because
It wasn't
you
like you
could,
had a choice.
like I said, most of the time you outside and the music is blaring because you're growing up in that project area and you hearing all the different music people having quinceañeras, parties, bar mitzvahs, everything else. So you got a variety of a lot of different music. So going back, looking at it, you like, hey, this is fun. People are enjoying themselves. And then when you found out that, hey, you can make a little bit of money on the side just providing music for the crowds that you were partying, DJing for. So, like I said, for us, it basically started off doing high school dances, and then it started progressing to parties, house parties. Then we went to clubs, and then, like I said, then it started with the weddings and all kinds of other special events. Just putting out good music that the people can go out and dance to and enjoy themselves. Because
Right.
if you think about it, if you put on a good song, no matter what that environment or what that vibe is, everybody locks into that song and they start having a great time.
Yeah.
Apparently, a lot of these DJs, there would be these rivalries that would happen.
Hmm.
So, like I mentioned that song Apache,
Hmm.
that Kid Herc, he was the one who discovered it, and he wouldn't let anybody look at his box of records because you didn't want the other guys to figure out what obscure beats you dug up.
Yeah,
Do you
because
have that
most
kind of
of these,
thing out
yeah, yeah, because most of these beats that you're looking at, these are old, they from old jazz songs, old blues songs. So you're looking at a different genre of music. And once you had something that was particularly your style, you wanted to keep that your style because you didn't want nobody to imitate it because now you couldn't market yourself as a DJ
Right.
because if they go, hey, Cool Herc is coming here, Bambot is coming here, they had their own vibe, their own set, so that everybody was like, yeah, I'm going to this set tonight or I'm going to that set. And that's how you built up your repertoire and your rep on the streets.
there?
Now, when in the early '90s,
Hmm.
the Beastie Boys' third album, "Check Your Head,"
Hmm.
really blew up, and
Hmm.
for me, that was kind of my getting on board uh, spot. with everything. But what I was always amazed is the depth, the deep samples that they took. Like, how did they know this jazz guy or the
Well,
so
they get the
these
Beastie Boys
DJs?
grew up. Beastie Boys grew up right in the middle of the
Yeah,
scene he's talking about, so they were hearing that stuff.
right.
That I've seen interviews
Yeah.
with them. They're like, "You're on the subway, and it was just everywhere. Everybody had a boom
It's
box."
incredible.
Yeah,
But you
The
got to,
exposure to all
yeah,
these.
but you got to also realize, even before the Beastie Boys came out, remember, you were getting that blend of heavy metal from Run DMC because of Rick
yeah,
Rubin,
yep,
Mhm.
Russell Simmons, and everything.
Yeah,
So there was that cross there. That's why when Walk This Way came out and became so popular, it
yeah,
was because it was a blend of hip hop and rock and roll that nobody has ever experienced before.
yeah.
But if you go back to Run DMC's first albums, you always hear those guitar riffs
yep,
and that heavy metal influence because that's from Rick Rubin.
yeah,
Right.
absolutely,
Um,
absolutely.
just for me, it blew me away that they would have some deep jazz
Mhm.
riff and just I'm like, how do they even know who to, you know?
Like just like I did, you somebody in their household or their family was into music. Some were more into jazz, some were more into gospel, blues, and they'll just listen to their parents playing that
Right,
record.
they're
And
pouring
then,
through.
yeah, and then there was something that would catch their ear and
Right,
they'll go, hey,
I'm gonna
that's
check
nice. I like that little smooth break right there.
uh-huh.
And they'll just remember it and go back because if you listen to a lot of the Tribe Called Quest, the early Nas, you hear that jazz influence because
Mhm.
Nas' father was a, a very good musician and played himself. So you got a lot of influences by people who family was involved with jazz and stuff. So
What
That's
is it? Who does the song "Jazz Music"? Is that Gangstar? You know what I'm talking
yeah,
about?
Gangstar, that's DJ Premier. He rest in peace to uh Premier. So Gangstar, because he passed away. But like I said, his influences, like I said, growing up, he grew up in a household that played a lot of jazz, a lot of blues. So he had a lot of opportunities to listen and build up his repertoire
right.
as far as beats and everything.
So you are early teens, and your dad's bringing home these
Albums and
albums and stuff, and
different genres, and you listen to them and you're like, wow, that's nice. And or something would catch your ear, some kind of melody, something out of the ordinary. And you were like, oh, that was interesting. And then you go back and you'll listen to it. I'm like, okay, try to figure out where that artist was coming from when he made that riff or
Mhm.
made that pattern that was on that record. Because, like I said, you'll hear something that you may only hear once in that whole album
Right.
because it was just for that part of that moment of that record. So it like I said, I give a lot of these DJs and producers a lot of credit for actually taking the time to really listen to the artist where
Mhm.
they got most of these samples from and really focus in on that one area to try to make something new out of something that was already made.
Right.
Mhm.
Now, did you get your dad to like take you with the turntables and all your records, or how did
Yeah, because that was a chore in itself. Because
yeah,
when you went to these different parties, you're talking about six, 6 to 12 crates of different records. Because you had to have your R&B, you had to
right,
have, depending on what party you were doing that, you had to have your slow jams, you had to have your dance records, you had to have your club records. So you had to have a variety of everything. Now everything is on the computer. You
on your
don't have to
yeah.
carry all of that around.
Well,
Right.
so
Like I
is your dad saying you're not taking my records to some party? You lost your
said,
mind?
well, what it was is that I'll go, hey, I just like this record. Can I borrow this record for which one? He said, as long as I don't destroy it or
Ah,
tear it up, he was fine with it.
But he
because
didn't
that
know
was
you
his concern.
were
At
you
most of the time,
scratching or
we weren't really scratching at that particular time. We were just like giving, like making sure everything blended together, making sure everything was rhythmic, everything was continuous so that you could keep the party going because you don't want to get to an end of a song and then have to stop and
yeah,
then
dead
throw on
air.
another, and throw on another record. So that's when you learn to get your ear as far as
Right.
putting things in rhythm, what song blends together nicely with all the different songs that, and you fill in the crowd. Once you get, like I said, most parties, you start off with the normal feel good stuff that you'll normally hear on the radio. But as the
Right.
crowds start to come in, now you start putting on the better stuff, the house music and stuff to get everybody hyped up.
Mhm.
Then once you got everybody to that crescendo, you're keeping it there until about the end of the show. Then you got to start slowing it down. That's when you start throwing in those slow jams at the end of the night to try to slow it down to bring that energy back down. Because if you when you're a DJ, you got to feel the vibe of that crowd. If you're
Yeah, you're
not,
watching them constantly.
yeah, you're watching them. If they're not dancing or they just standing around doing nothing, now you're saying to yourself, now we got to step it up a little bit because we got to get these people. This is what they expecting of us to bring this party to life to make it so that this is a party that somebody would talk about.
Right. And you know your music that you have with you enough that
Mm-hmm.
you know what's I'm going to put this on and then I'm going to do this one next.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing that. How
Yeah.
how did it play out? How long was a show or
Well, it
did you
it
just go
varied
and
because some of these, like I said, start a house party can start at 9 o'clock, but won't jump off until about 11, and then you go on for about 2 or 3 hours till 1 to 2 o'clock, or till the cops come knocking, telling you got to cut that music off.
right.
And then, like I said, at a high school party, you got a time frame because you got between 6 to maybe 9 o'clock. So in that time period, you got to give them enough energy so they can enjoy themselves during that party.
Let's
So,
dive into the history a little bit. I kind of alluded to this at the beginning, but if you look at
mm-hmm,
like hip hop history books like "Can't Stop, Won't Stop," which is a
mm-hmm,
hip hop history, or a lot of these mainstream hip hop history documentaries, they're basically saying the whole thing started with Cool Herc. You know, he brings his sound system over from Jamaica. There's a
mm-hmm,
whole history in Jamaica of DJs with sound systems, and
mm-hmm,
they developed the whole genre of dub and all that stuff, which is
mm-hmm,
awesome, and basically a precursor to the whole thing that happened in New York. But
mm-hmm,
the gospel, as most people know it, is, you know, Cool Herc moves up from Jamaica, gets his sound system going here, holding these parties. Then African Bambaataa, Grandmaster Flash. That's kind of like the Holy Trinity. Those three cats
mm-hmm,
kick it all off.
mm-hmm,
There's this documentary on YouTube, Founding Fathers: The Untold Story of Hip Hop,
mm-hmm,
and they're saying basically even before Cool Herc, there was scenes happening, and all that stuff that I just described happened in the South Bronx. They're
mm-hmm,
saying in Queens and Brooklyn, there was these cats, Grandmaster Flowers, who Grandmaster Flash got his name from, King Charles, Pete DJ Jones, these two cats called the Disco Twins that were twin
mm-hmm,
brothers. They would do DJing and a lot of, you know, kind of where they'd spin around, DJ with their hands behind their back, and all kinds of crazy stuff that was happening. They're claiming before all the stuff in the Bronx, and it was the Bronx guys that got connected with the Manhattan art scene, and that's how they ended up getting famous. And then this
mm-hmm.
whole scene in Brooklyn and Queens was kind of forgotten. What is your take on all that? You said it was kind of a debated issue.
Well, because you debate it, because if you look at all three areas, the Bronx, Brooklyn, and Queens, they all right next to each other. So, had there been influences that we may not have heard about? Yes. But like you said, that married that that blending of that Bronx and that culture being put into the mainstream, that's what puts them on the map first. Like I said,
That
nobody
kicked it
can
all off.
disclaim that it didn't happen up in Brooklyn because there were a lot of DJs, there were a lot of clubs and stuff up there, a lot of scenes up there also. Same thing in Queens. So you can't say yes or no to anything, but can all those influences be missed? Yes, because like I said, who put it into the mainstream first? Because you're not hearing most of this until you hear about who hurt the Bambatas, the Grandmaster Flash, because they started putting things on Vital, the mixtapes, and Underground.
Yeah.
Now, did when you were going and starting these parties, were you going up to New York and kind of crashing that scene, or did you have?
Yeah, because you had to get a vibe of what was hot. Because, like I said, you can only listen to so much. Back in the early '80s, there weren't many stations that was playing hip hop. So, in order to get some hip hop, you had to go to the source.
You had to go there,
or get a mixtape passed.
What I'm asking is, was there a scene in New Jersey where you were, or did you all just, we have to go to New York?
It was a mixture of both, because once the New York scene really started popping off, and then you started getting all the different video shows and showing all the new hip hop that was coming out, then you had a lot of producers that started producing and having little parties at roller rinks and stuff like that, or any venue that they can book to promote hip hop and get these artists to come down when they were still raw and fresh, and you can get them at a reasonable price. Because a lot of these artists, once they got established, it was you looking at a show that you can probably get them for maybe 150, 200. Now that done went up to $500, $1,000. So you're looking at trying to find venues that can hold it. Then you had to get security and everything else in order to provide a safe place for these artists to come and perform and do music that nobody's really heard of. Because, like I said, it wasn't until I want to say about 87, 88, you start hearing DJ Red Alert and Marley Marl and all the different artists, DJs on the radio, and they actually had their own platforms to put out music that they produced with artists that you never heard of. And that's how you started to build this hip hop scene from the ground up.
So how much, when you were going and you were doing your own shows, how much money were you making? Was it just one night a week that you would go, like on a Friday night?
It would depend, because where I grew up at, there were several high schools, and everybody would have like a homecoming week. And like I said, you can only do so many in a weekend, because like I said, if you were doing a party at a high school and then you had to go do something at a club or something, now you're looking at two different places. You may be Central Jersey, South Jersey, someplace else. So you try to book it where you can make be consistent with it. Because unless you had a particular place where you DJ'd every week at, it got hard sometimes to actually find places to, do a show.
Did you ever hear of like maybe somebody just rolling up and taking a DJ's record collection? Or
Oh yeah, that has happened. People will try to see because like I said, if you have something that they want, they would definitely try to, let me look in your record. No, you can't look. That's why it's usually, when we went and did parties, it was like 3 or 4 of us minimum.
Yeah,
you got to
guard the blood there. That's all your records. And
you got to guard everything, because you had the person because we'll rotate. Somebody will be up there DJing, but the other 2 will be watching, making sure that the speaker and the sound system is still in the right, at the right volume. And then you had somebody in the back making sure that nobody's touching the records. And then you had that person, because everybody's asking for a request for something. Oh, can you play this? Can you play that? Like, okay, give me your list. Give me, take the list down, and we'll try to integrate it into the program.
Yeah, I just didn't think about that. Like, you get all these kids, and you're out in the big city.
Mm.
Maybe you got half your dad's record collection with you. Part of you's like, man, if I come
You
home,
know, like I said, most of the time we get there, set up, make sure we have what we need set up to get this party started. And then once we start to slow down, we will slowly start putting things into the vehicle so that we can get ready to get up out of there. Because, like I said, you never knew what's going to happen at the end of the night. A fight may break out, that you had a perfectly great party all day, and then somebody wants to mess it up
well,
at the
just
end of the
something
night.
stupid. That sucks.
So, so you had to be prepared for all of that. So,
So basically, you have I like kind of interweaving your story with the whole hip hop history thing. So you have the scenes in those three boroughs happening, and then the Bronx scene. Those guys start going out to Manhattan, and they're networking, and you start having graffiti shows at art galleries in Manhattan. I think it was Fab Five Freddy was friends with the Cats and Blondie, and actually in the video for Rapper's Delight, that song they did, but that's I'm sorry, for Rapture, the song that the Blondie song in
Rapture,
1981. But one thing that happened that's really kind of controversial 2 years before that was the song "Rapper's Delight" by Sugar Hill Gang. Right? There's this, and I think it was out of New Jersey, the record label. It was husband and
out of
wife.
East Orange, East
Yeah.
Orange, New Jersey. Yep.
Like this husband and wife that just heard about this hip hop thing and decided they were going to release a record. The wife overhears some guy named, I think his name was Hank. He's in a bakery that she's at, and he's rapping to himself, and she just recruits him to rap on the record. He's got a friend who's actually a real legit DJ named Casanova Fly, and he says, "Hey, I got this record deal to rap. Can I use some of your rhymes?" And that guy, he regretted it for the rest of his life, but in the moment, he's like, "Yeah, sure." So,
like I said, hip hop, like I said, at that time, you still have that going on today. They call ghostwriters. It still goes on to this day.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, you have rappers that are actually good at what their crafts are, and they'll always be timeless. One of my favorites is, like I said, Melly Mel, Kumo D, KRS-One. These are the ones that are more conscientious, and their style just lasts forever because they have a message and a purpose behind everything that they put out there. So when you start talking about that controversy of Sugar Hill, like I said, Hank and the dude that Casanova, he did write most of those rhymes for him. But like I said, the reason why he regretted it is because the royalties. Because you can still hear that song being played now,
he didn't
and
get paid.
he's not getting the royalties that he should be receiving.
Sure.
Yep. So that comes out, and there's a lot of people who are like, "Who is this Hank guy? He wasn't really part of the scene. It's just this produced record." It did make it. It did give the genre a little bit of a higher profile in the city, at least.
Now, was that Sugar Hill Gang or?
Yeah, Sugar Hill Gang.
That was Sugar Hill Gang on Sugar Hill Records. So
it's a totally produced thing by the
wow,
original.
I thought they were legit.
No, there's a lot of controversy about them.
Yeah, like I said, the controversy, like I said, is just that being a ghostwriter and somebody using your rhymes, like I said, you're not getting the royalties later on that you should be receiving, and that's where it's going to hurt a lot of these artists. Even though even back then he just gave them the rhymes, but he wasn't thinking it was going to be as big of success as it was for that at that time.
He was well enough known, this guy Casanova Fly. Walking down the street and people would be like, "Hey man, congratulations, I heard your record," because they knew his rhymes from the party. He's like, that's not me.
Yeah, exactly. So like I said, Yeah, and like I said, there's a lot of regrets and stuff. And like I said, going back to even that, most of that royalties, the actual group is not getting. It's actually going to the Sugar Hill production people because that's the way they
Yeah,
structured the contract.
yeah,
So
yeah,
they're not even really getting all the royalties from that song that they should be.
yeah.
Now, E, when you were coming up and like the Grandmaster Flash and the
Hmm.
Furious Five, Spoonie G,
Hmm.
New Rap Language, did those songs just blow your mind, or was it more of the same from what you had seen being in the scene? You maybe you already knew all that, but now it's on a record and it's you know.
Yeah, what it was just going mainstream. People were now getting to hear the stories of the tales of what was going on in people's actual neighborhood or the
Mm-hmm,
hood, as they call it.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
They're giving you stories. Take classic example, White Lines. That was happening when he was there. The
Okay.
message. You've seen the junkies in the back in the alleys and all this other stuff. Like
Mm-hmm,
I said, it was given a given word and a picture of what was happening in the environment at that time.
mm-hmm.
And like I said, going back to Melly Mel, Kumo D, and those early pioneers, Busy Bee, and all of them. Like I said, they knew the vibe of the streets and giving us those new lingo like Funky Fresh and this and all. It just puts it started that culture of making hip hop grow, it not being just a party thing. Because if you go back to the early mixtapes that you listen to, most of them were just hype, just getting the party hot. Yeah, say
Right.
that. Yeah, it's everything getting everybody party, and then they'll drop a beat, and then they'll throw like a rap over it, talking about what they were doing for the day. But now it started to get more intricate when they started talking about what was happening on the streets, what they had to do to survive and
Mm-hmm.
make money in order to keep their head above water. So,
Right.
And this was like you had people like Schoolie D
hmm
before like everybody talks about Ice T and the 6 in the morning, but if you look
hmm
at an album like Saturday Night by Schoolie D,
hmm
it's a few years before that. He's already kind of talking about what's
it's
going on
just
in his
art
neighborhood.
imitating life. Like I
Yeah,
said, you got to hear something that you like in order to imitate it. And like I said, you
Yeah.
started to see the growth from, like I said, your New York rappers, your Jersey rappers, your Philly rappers, and then you go down to Florida, you had the Two Live Crew, 95 South. Then you start to go to Houston, Ghetto Boys, and everybody else out that way. Then you start going out to California. Everybody forget about Too Short. Too Short was massive back in the day.
Yeah, he
yeah,
had a lot of mixtapes.
Hmm.
He's been around
Long
probably
time.
longer than
yeah.
a lot of them.
He's got,
Hmm.
and his stuff is still good. I mean, I've got a
Hmm.
Too Short playlist. It's hours long. It's just
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
and then you had don't forget I'm in Atlanta, so don't forget in the
Adrian.
90s,
Yeah.
Dirty
Yeah.
South. Yeah.
Yes.
And there's always it's interesting too because starts in New York, then the West Coast thing happens, and there's this West Coast versus East Coast thing,
Hmm.
and then Dirty South happens, and there's this Dirty South versus West Coast thing or New York thing.
Hmm.
There's some moment when Outkast was at an award show and they were getting booed, and I mean,
Really?
oh yeah. They were getting booed. They were at an award show in New York, and people were booing them because Atlanta. Who are these hicks from Atlanta?
Oh, see, Outkast is amazing.
Yeah.
Hmm. That happened with Snoop Dogg when he first came out. No, they was like, "Who is this cat?" And then when he came out, and he said, "Nobody got no love for Snoop Dogg," and all this. Like I said,
Mhm.
it's because people were still not used to hearing rap, except from the source coming from New York. That's
Yeah.
what
Well,
everybody was
and
looking for.
you
So,
also got the Apollo Theater where people would
hmm
go just to see some poor bastard get booed to hell. So it was I would say that's a cultural thing of, if you're going to make it, you got to pay your dues,
Mm-hmm.
and we're going to come and boo the shit out of you if we can, you know.
Like I said, people like originality. If you can really sing and really rap, the crowd will take to you. But as soon as you start going out there and you're not about anything, they'll
Right.
let you know.
Yeah.
That's the one thing I do like about growing up in that tri-state area. They were honest with you. If they didn't like you, they'll let you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, you got to win them over, and
Yeah.
they're gonna make you work for it,
Mm-hmm.
for sure. So you're doing these house parties. Did you ever feel like you turned away from a path that maybe would have been more lucrative, or
Well, like I said, when you look at it back then, it was still in its, well, like they say, the infant
infancy?
stages, and it was still growing. Nobody knew back then that it'd be the $1 billion juggernaut that it is right now, because you
Mhm.
still have world breakdancing competitions that go on in Germany,
Mhm.
England all the time. Once a year, you still have the
That's
DJ battles that go on every year, the
right.
DMCs, the world. So the culture is never going anywhere. But back then, can you see it being that way? No, because the record labels and the A&R people really kept in check what was actually being put out there. If you weren't being promoted correctly, you
Right.
weren't hearing a lot of the underground stuff that you would have to go and get a mixtape to, or
Mhm.
listen to the late night shows like Teddy Ted and them, and Clark Kent and them on these college stations where they have like a show from like 1 a.m. to like 3 o'clock in the morning, and they'll just play some underground stuff that you never heard before. And you sitting up there like, wow, there's a lot of different artists out there that you may not hear about
Yeah.
because they're not on any of these major record labels.
And
Or
MTV was ignoring rap for till like 86 or
yeah, and that's why they gave Fab Five Freddy the Yo MTV Raps, and he started, and then he could introduce artists from. And the one thing I did like about it, it gave you a taste of New York, the South, from Atlanta down to Florida,
yeah.
and then you went out west to the West Coast, and then you got some, like I said, from Texas. You got your Chicago people, so it would give you a mix of a lot of different artists, so that you were going, okay, this is what hip hop is doing across the country.
Yeah.
So that was always a plus once you started getting these video shows on, like Ralph McDaniels, his video show put on a lot of people, because a lot of these groups back in the day were on these small independent labels,
Mhm.
and they were putting out these songs, but lo and behold, looking at how they were signing these contracts, they were making pennies on the dollar.
Ah,
So they
yeah.
weren't getting really their royalties, but what they should have been getting.
Mhm. And
So
then so let's go back to like 81, 82.
mhm,
um uh Beat Street and
mhm.
Breakin'. uh were those just Hollywood making trying to make some money off of it, or did you
Those were
guys?
most of those were independent films that a lot of upstart directors started working on to actually start to put the culture out there. Because when you talk about Beat Street, Wild Style, and all of them, you're looking at the whole genre of rap, and it's because you're looking at the styles, the fashions, the Adidas suits with the baseball shirts,
So
with
so
the
y'all embrace those movies. It wasn't
yes, because it was something that we were getting ingrained to. Because like I said, that the Levi's, the matching Lee jacket with the pants. You had Run DMC pushing Adidas. People were wearing Pumas. Then you had the fat shoelaces. You had the name buckles. You had everything. Like I said, hip hop, the Gazelles, the Kangos. So
yeah.
you were looking at a cultural change that most people weren't expecting. Because when you hear a new genre of music, you're just listening at the music, but they were bringing you
Everything.
dance. They were bringing you hairstyles. That's why you got the high top fades. You got all this other stuff going with it. So you got the clothes. You got the, like you said, the graffiti, all the different artists and what you call it, how they grew out. And then you started having your DJs because remember, Curtis Blow, his DJ, that's why his name is DJ Run, because he was the DJ for Curtis Blow.
Right.
So you're looking at artists, how they began and where they ended. Big Daddy Kane used to DJ for Biz Markie. So you're looking at a lot of artists that were DJs that transferred into the MCing. So it's a lot out there.
So
when you mention the movies, don't forget it's a few years down the road, but Tougher Than Leather, in my opinion, is one of the most underrated hip hop movies out there, and it's more of like a 70s style blaxploitation action movie starring Run DMC, but it's fucking phenomenal.
With those movies, I would think here's Hollywood or these movies finally giving a nod to like what you're involved in. It had to be really powerful.
Like I said, you look at it and you be like, okay, what are they putting it out there for the right reason? Because
that's what I'm asking. I think that's what I'm asking.
Because you had movies like, I like the Fat Boys. They had their part in time, but like I said, the movie Disorderlies, you got to look at those movies. Like I said, they were for comic review, more comedy. And then, like I said, when you start to get into like the house parties and stuff like that, now you're starting to get back into the culture. So, like I said, they can exploit a lot of different things, but you got to take it for what it is.
Yeah, but so like Beat Street and Breakin', you felt those represented
more the culture because you're looking at the beginnings. Because when you look at Beat Street and you're looking at the Treacherous Three, you're looking at Kumo D, a young Dougie Fresh beatboxing, they under that Christmas doing that Christmas rap.
Yeah.
So you're looking at the beginnings of where some of the prominent hip hop artists. You're looking at Us Girls. You've seen a lot of different groups at the time that weren't getting the shine that they should have, but they did get it in the movie.
In the movie, and you had Wild Style. I think is an amazing documentary.
Yeah, that's more of a documentary. I wouldn't call that a movie. It's a documentary of how the different styles of tagging and hip hop and everything starts to evolve.
In there, young Ice-T is in Wild Style.
Yeah, because Ice-T was a dancer before he became a rapper. So you got a lot of those. If you look at some of those older videos and stuff, you'll see Vin Diesel up in there dancing. You'll see P. Diddy dancing. Most of them were just dancers before they became artists and producers.
Who was the guy? He was like a big break dancer, had the big wide brim hat. He was in breaking.
Oh, Shabba Doo. You're talking about Shabba Doo. Rest in peace to him because he passed away.
Recently.
And
yeah.
So you're looking at a lot of artists that, like I said, from those small beginnings, they started branching off. And like I said, you'll see them regularly on Soul Train and doing this and doing different TV appearances because of their dance routines.
And Rerun from What's Happening, he had that dance.
The dance group, the dances that he had up on there. But like I said, those are small beginnings of where, like I said, you're looking at a culture being built over time.
Yeah. It really is incredible when you just like this episode, we're kind of spotlighting the early stuff, but it's so easy to jump to now and see the influence. It's all it's still rippling out like they threw a rock in the middle of the water, and it's just
like I said, is now you got a lot of the artists that are in control of their own music. They're their own producers. They're their own A&Rs. They do all their own producing. So they're getting all of the royalties, unlike back in the days where most of these artists weren't getting their share of putting out an album. and just getting, like I said, pennies on the dollar for
Right.
what they were putting out there, getting gold albums for and going platinum later on, but they weren't seeing all the royalties that they should have been seeing.
And
So
some of the better artists only recorded a few songs, like Spoonie
Mm-hmm.
G. I think Spoonie G is amazing, but
Mm-hmm.
you can't really find any.
Because you're
Like
looking at a lot of independent labels that went under after a few years. Like I say, you'll have a record label start up, they'll do well, but after a while, a bigger record company will buy them out.
yeah,
So that's what was happening with all the other artists and all the genres that was going on, because you had a lot of artists that had to change their names. Uh, Craig G, Craig Mack used to be under another. His name used to be Easy E under something else, under a different label, Sleeping Bag Records. So
his name was Easy E.
it was like it was. I'm trying to think. I'm not. It's not wasn't easy, but he had a different name before he became Craig Mack. So,
Yeah.
like I said, most of these record labels went under, and these artists had to go to bigger labels, or these bigger labels brought out those smaller independent labels.
mm-hmm.
So that's why you don't see a lot of the Spoonie G albums or anything. You can't find them because they were just small at the time, and they were very limited on what they can produce and put out.
If anybody can find him, Silky can find him. He gets all the rare stuff.
I look for that stuff, but
Yeah.
it reminds me of the new wave of British heavy metal. You had a lot of these metal bands in England that literally recorded a 45. They literally only had 2 songs, or maybe they had 2 or 3 singles, so they got 6 songs, and they're revered so much now by these metal bands. But I that was my scene when I was 10, 11,
It's
12.
also the other parallel is that was happening at the exact same time as the late 70s, early 80s punk rock scene.
Yeah.
A lot of these indie labels and these little scattered obscure records.
These little
and then
DIY do it yourself.
Later on, you have Nirvana cashing in, making $100 million.
Right.
But one scene I want to touch on, because this is what roped me into it, was late 80s, and I think I mentioned this on another episode. That I'm talking to this friend of mine. I'm in college, and I'm talking to this friend of mine. We're both music nuts, and he's telling me about, and he's got 2 cassettes in his hand. One is Paul's Boutique, and the other is 3 Feet High and Rising. And they both just come out, and he's like, "Man, you gotta check these out." And to me, the Beastie Boys were like these cheesy jock dudes who were rapped about, partying. I never got that. I love that first album now, but when it came out, I didn't really get it.
Yeah, frat boy. You were probably
basically you looked like he said it was more frat boys, just partying the real heavy metal music over with some hip hop beats. But like I said, you got to give a credit to Rick Rubin for that, because and Russell Simmons, because that was his little juggernaut. Because you got to remember, at the time, besides Run DMC, he had LL Cool J, he had DJ Jazzy Jeff, he had a lot of artists besides, and the Beastie Boys and everybody else, and they were going on tours back then. And this is how most of these songs were being put out there that you basically didn't hear before the albums came out.
Right.
So I didn't quite get that first album, but he's saying you got to check out Paul's Boutique. It's amazing. Check out this group De La Soul. So I went that afternoon to the record store. I bought Paul's Boutique and De La Soul. Beastie Boys, we've done a whole episode on them. A lot of people know their story. But De La Soul was basically part of this whole scene, the native tongue scene.
Yeah.
Basically, De La Soul, Tribe Called Quest, Jungle Brothers. And I got into all those groups then from that. And that was kind of a transitional phase between this old school hip hop that we're talking about, and then the kind of '90s thing where
Yes.
the artists were also becoming moguls, but in between there was this native tongue scene, and apparently it was connected with African Bambaataa Zulu Nation.
Yeah, because that was more DJ Red Alert. You had other groups that started that genre. You got a what's that that's a Sonic. You had other groups called Ultramagnetic MCs,
Yeah,
and
they're
that was
fucking
that
amazing.
that
Yeah.
that was that starting of that blending and going into the Jungle Brothers and everybody else putting out those melodic jazz beats and stuff like that. So,
Yeah,
like I said, there are a lot of artists. Prince Paul, you got to give him a lot of the credit for that because he produced most of those albums.
mhm.
Mhm.
And then you had In Living Color, the TV show, just bringing it right back uh,
Hmm.
to that cultural thing of comedy and music and
Hmm.
the whole. That was a huge show.
But that just feeds back to like all the shows we had before that. Like you
Mhm.
want to say Hee Haw, you want to say Sha Na Na. Most
Uh-huh.
of those were geared to show new music, that genre, and to get you used to hearing that music.
Yeah.
And then once you got used to it, like now you're looking for it.
Mhm.
It gave a face to the musicians and the artists at that time because you'll hear the song, but you didn't know who they were.
Right. And I have to say, at the time, 82, 83, I'm like 11, 12 years old for
Hmm.
me.
Hmm.
I felt excluded from some of the rap scene. But as I've gotten older and you look, it was all just come to the party. Like it was not anti anybody. If any,
No, because it just depends on where you were and where the party was at that particular time. Like I said, the culture was always there. Like I said, it wasn't just the urban people buying rap records. You don't sell 100,000 in one hood or one neighborhood.
Yeah.
That's something globally or
yeah,
across the country
yeah,
that
yeah.
people are vibing to that beat. It's something about it that drew you into that music.
Hmm. That
This
was
is
a powerful statement, E.
Hmm.
another key turning point. Obviously, is
Hmm.
Easy E putting together NWA, and if you
Hmm.
listen to a lot of these groups that were around during that period, if you listen
Hmm.
to their discography,
Hmm.
it'll be a certain way up until Straight Outta Compton and Fuck the Police and all that, and
Hmm.
whatever albums they released after that came out, they're trying to be NWA.
Yes.
That's how
But that's
influential.
just following the trend at the
Yeah,
time.
Yeah,
yeah,
Because like I said, you'll get a lot of one hit wonders from
sure,
here and there. But
sure.
like I said, that's just art being imitated.
Yeah,
hmm
and that's any band,
Hmm.
any
Yeah.
genre.
Yeah,
yeah.
that's any
I'm,
genre of music.
I'm
Yeah,
sure,
It's
but
just what's
what I'm
hot
trying
at the time.
what I'm
yeah.
trying to emphasize is,
Hmm.
and I think Easy E. I know Ice Cube gets a lot of the credit in that band because he wrote all the lyrics and everything, or most of the lyrics. But Easy E, his attitude and his outlook, putting that group together, really did change the whole face of hip hop. I mean, it
Hmm.
was forever changed after that. There was shit you could not talk about before NWA, and
Hmm.
you had to address after NWA.
Well,
Or
if you look at a lot of the artists back in the day, you had a clean version that was
yeah,
not apparent,
I've,
explicit.
I've
And
accidentally
so,
added clean versions to my playlist before,
yeah,
and I'm like, damn, I got to
yeah.
delete that.
So you got to look at it in that aspect because if you talk about the political vibes and stuff like that, you had Public Enemy, you had a clean version, and you had the explicit version of everything. So
Yeah,
you have to look at
yeah,
what you were listening to at that time. But like you said, NWA, they have their part in history because that was the first time that you had a lot of uh, different areas of the country trying to ban hip hop at the time. They didn't want any artists to perform. So
Yeah,
that's where you had a lot of that controversy.
you
yeah.
had cops showing up at their shows telling them
Hmm.
they could not play
Just to
"Fuck the
shut it
Police."
down.
Well,
Yeah,
just tell them not to play that one song,
song. Yeah.
and they would play it anyways.
Yeah.
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 Because that's what the people came there to do. All they did was, all instead of hurting it, all they did was just promote it more.
Always.
Yeah,
Every time you try to
we
ban
can
something, you just give it strength.
we can draw the same parallel to a band called Black Flag playing out in LA, doing the punk scene, and the cops came and swarmed a specific show, beat everybody down, and all it did was make it more popular.
There's a lot of parallel between punk rock and hip hop as far as they were both considered dangerous by the establishment. And it's hard now to think of the authorities and there are issues with the authorities still to this day. I'm not saying it's gotten good or better, but it's hard to think of a time when the authorities considered a style of music as a threat to society. But back then,
but that goes back to rockabilly in the early
50s. Yeah.
That goes even with Elvis. They told him if he gyrated his hips on stage, they were going to arrest him. So
yeah.
So you had that going on for years. Like I said, you have a social police and a conscious police. You get what I'm saying? Yeah. And you got to look at the time frame and the time. Like I said, the further back you go in the 60s, 50s, everything was more country, gospel, and that was the norm back then. Everybody went to church on Sundays and this and this. They weren't used to seeing somebody jump up on stage and start gyrating their hips. And
look at Screaming Jay Hawkins. He would rise up out of a coffin. That had to freak the shit out of people.
Yeah, like I said, you had Parliament coming out of a spaceship, and the smoke that was coming out of there was marijuana. So, so it was controversy everywhere. So,
I love it. Is there anything else? We kind of left your timeline at 17.
I got a question for E real quick.
All right.
So you did a lot of these DJing parties and stuff, records and reading the crowd, which is everything like a typical hip hop DJ would be doing on a show anyways. But did you ever DJ like with an MC or a rapper, or was it mainly just the DJ is the thing, and those were the kind of gigs you played?
We had a little bit of both, because the crew that we hung with, shout out to my JUC brothers, just us chilling crew back in the day. So we had MCs, we had a beatboxer, but our main thing was just to get these parties started. And every once in a while, somebody was like, let's get something started. And then they'll start coming up there freestyling and rapping and putting something out there that was something different. And everybody, and you get the crowd even more hyped. So it was a little bit of everything. But majority of the time, we were just basically doing the parties just to get everybody their enjoyment and their entertainment.
Now, how much did you make any money, or was this more?
Yeah, it depended on what you were doing. Like I said, you got more for like weddings and clubs and stuff like that, because you were the band, so to say, for that particular event. The high school ones, they will vary. House parties, they will vary, because it depends on, because most of the time you're doing it for somebody's family or good friend of them, and it's their party for their birthday party or something, and you're not trying to charge them outlandish, what you call, but you want something that you can recoup your gas money and like I said, and make it, like I said, they'll have food there, they'll bring you a plate and all that other stuff. You're doing barbecues and family reunions and stuff like that. So you're getting your food and everything, but you needed something that you can replenish your gas. If you had some equipment went bad, you can replace it. That's what you were basically looking for.
I got you. So kind of break and even make a little money.
Yeah, you make a little, lose a little. So it was a if you can have something steady, it was a good thing.
Right. And you probably pulled some honeys along the way.
Oh yeah, you definitely, because like I said, you the man keeping everybody dancing. Of course, you got that.
Yeah.
So what made you eventually leave that area, the whole tri-state area?
Like I said, family, having
Family?
kids, growing up. It's like I
Mhm.
said, growing up would change a lot of things for you because you got to put things in perspective. And
Sure.
like
Yeah.
I said, once you start having your children and you got to provide for them, you got to make sure you have something steady. And like I
Yeah.
said, on the weekends where you can squeeze something in here and there was a plus because that gave you a little extra money to do something later on with the family, plan a family trip or something like that. That gave you a little pocket cash to do something extra. But
Right.
like I said, it's just life in general. Like I said, if you can, like I said, most of these DJs that you see going around with all these different artists nowadays, like I said, they had to put their time in. They had to build that rep, and now they go out and they open for most of these R&B artists and stuff like that. But like I said, they just doing the same thing everybody used to do back in the day. They making the crowd hype and getting them ready for the artists to come out and perform.
Mhm.
Now, let me ask you this: uh, having been there right at the beginning, I mean, you
Mhm.
you you talked about the Last Poets and Gil Scott Heron. Um, are you happy with where it went? Did it go above and beyond your
It went
expectations?
way above and beyond what I expected because everything, like they say, everything is a fad for a while. But when something where you have a whole culture, like I said, you had clothing, you had the graffiti, you had the music, you had the artists, you had the dances. It
Yeah.
was you just couldn't contain that in one simple area without it growing and
And it did
expanding.
mutate because you had Prince, you had all these different styles.
Hmm.
You could find hip hop roots here and there, and then
Yeah.
movies like The Last Dragon and things like
Hmm.
that.
Yeah, like I said,
Kind of,
Prince even that record by Arrested Development, Tennessee, they
mhm.
used the sample from Prince, and Prince told him as long as you give him just a little bit of the royalties from that sample, he was fine with it. You see what I'm saying? So you got to look at everybody got sampled, even Michael Jackson, even though a lot of the hip hop beats, like I said, James Brown, and
Yeah,
I like to put it this way. I know the artist, the original artist, needed to get their royalties, but it actually helped keep their music relevant longer than what it would have been.
that is the very profound. Um, so you in this all these years later, you've got to be proud of where it went. That
Yeah,
it didn't just die on the vine or
yeah.
yeah,
Because it once it went culturally and you started seeing it in Japan, China, across the seas, in the UK, and everybody else was emceeing and rapping and producing, and
okay,
everybody were putting in the time to actually make the music better. Because the first professionally produced album that I actually had was Houdini's first album. Houdini was going over to Europe, and they had big backing behind them, doing massive productions behind them, even before that was even popular in the United States.
that's crazy.
So you got to, like I said, it's it's something that you go, wow, I experienced that from the beginning, and then you like, and it's still relevant today
Yeah,
as
that's
it was as it started.
yeah, that's it's incredible how unifying
Mm-hmm.
because you've got so many cultures in it.
Mm-hmm.
It really, and I go back to how I felt when I initially saw it. I
Mm-hmm.
thought, well, this is anti everything.
Everything, yeah. But like I said,
It
it was
really
just
isn't.
them telling about what was going on in their community at the time. It
Yeah,
was nothing to be, like I
excluded from.
said, proud
That's what
of, but that was what was going on in the streets. And they thought that everybody should know because
Yeah,
unless you're from that area, you don't know what's going on there.
exactly. That's it. That's
that's
it.
what a lot of great art is people just they're just putting their experience into some kind of an art form, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
people
and
that
that
don't
goes.
if you look at I remember I remember playing thrash metal
Mm-hmm.
to to people back when it first came out and they're looking at me like what the hell is this? Like horrified
Mm-hmm.
That's just some kids from the Bay Area
Yes.
talking about their experience. You know?
Mm-hmm.
Playing as fast as they could. And what's
Yeah.
funny with heavy metal, you have people's reactions are like, "How can you
Mm-hmm.
listen to that?" And then people that are like, "Man, that soothes me
Mm-hmm.
because it's so
Whenever I get
fast,
stressed
so
out, I just throw some Slayer on and I
yeah."
calm down.
And other people would hear Slayer and be like, "Oh my,"
What is
get
he doing up in there? He's tearing up. He's on
Get-
some drugs. He's doing
getting
something
a
up in there.
crucifix
Yeah,
out.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But they don't know. Like I said, they said music calms the savage beast.
That-
What soothes you doesn't soothe everybody.
Yeah. But that's the beauty of music,
Mm-hmm.
is how personal it is, and I enjoy finding out what someone else likes. It's a way to see who they are, and maybe
Mm-hmm.
you laugh at it like, "Wow, that is the worst genre of music I've ever heard." And it's you don't say that to them, but inside you're like, "Wow, that is horrible." But you have to laugh and go, "Well, that's what they like." So you can't,
Yeah.
you
Like I
know,
said, every generation has gone through this because you go back to the Chuck Berrys and
yeah.
all of them. Everybody's like, "Oh, that's not going to fit. That ain't going to last. That's just a fade." Here we go, 50, 60 years later, those songs are still relevant. People are
That's
still.
my,
Yeah.
I would say,
Mm-hmm.
Not to mention all the artists they influenced.
Mm-hmm.
Snags and myself.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we started with was
Mm-hmm.
Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Bo Diddley.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my, that stuff is, to this day, it's just so pure.
Yeah, back when we were growing up in the 1950s, that's all.
Yes. Yes. No. But there was that 50s resurgence in the 70s, and that's what, watching Happy Days and Sean on
Mm-hmm. Like I said, everything has its time and place. And like I said, if it was good, it lasts. If you don't hear it now, it wasn't meant to last.
good. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's how it basically boils down to. Because I talk to my kids and my and I tell them all the time. I was like, most of these songs that you're listening to today are just remakes of older songs that's already been done.
What was the thing you used to say to your kids when they knew they were in trouble? What was?
Oh, I was like, I got two letters that I'm thinking out between M and P.
That's N-O.
So, like I said, it's just certain things that will stick with you no matter what it is. But like I said, good music is good music. Like I said, is all music good for everybody? No. You got to find what you like, what you prefer. But I can from my point of view, listening to all the different genres over the year, heavy metal, rock, classic, everything, blues, gospel. Like I said, there's something for everybody out there.
And for me, if it's from the heart, I am able to appreciate some aspect of it. And I would say Snags feels the same.
People ask me what kind of music you like. I'm like, anything that's not top 40 crap.
Yeah.
The syrupy, where it's fake,
Like I said, even nowadays you got some of these bands, these boy bands and stuff.
Yeah.
We know what the original boy bands were back in the day, the Jackson 5, Beatles, New Edition, all of that. Yeah. Like I said, some of these new groups, the thing that still shocks me, most of them, especially with that group from Korea, China, they can't, most of them, they can't even speak English. So how is it that they can produce and hold American record, but they can barely speak English?
Yeah, I've got an ex-girlfriend who is what is the name of that Korean band? I know who you're talking about. She's a nut to them. Yeah, and they what they do, and she's our age, and she's not, and what they do, these mainly girls that are into them. They learn Korean so they can follow the songs. They translate the songs and figure it out. Oh man, I probably shouldn't give them. I'm not going to look up the name.
But that's what I'm talking about, because that goes back to that Milli Vanilli stuff that happened back in the day. Are
Yeah.
you really singing? That's
Uh-huh.
the question that I got to question and ask
Oh man,
because
especially live, a lot of these artists now are just lip syncing to
yes,
recorded
Yeah.
tracks, whether they sang in the studio with auto tune assistance or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Millie Vanilli didn't even do that, but
mm-mm,
live, a lot of these
Well, they
big
got
groups,
crucified, and there's some
yeah,
big names now that have
mm-hmm,
screwed up, and it's all fine. So
yeah, a
mm,
lot of these live. It doesn't matter the genre. A lot of these live acts now, they'll just be lip syncing to a
yeah,
recording. Yes, it's sad,
mm-hmm.
really
well,
sad.
I think we're pretty much wrapped up. What do you have any
No pun
last
intended.
parting
Like I said, I'm just like I said to see it from its beginning to where it is now, this multi-billion-dollar industry. I just hope it just continues to grow,
yeah.
continue to provide a positive message along with still giving a good party vibe that you can dance to.
Yeah, to spring off of that, I would say that it's in all the neighborhoods. People, it's always going to be at the next barbecue or family reunion, and
Hmm.
that's the beauty of it. All the way back, and just that it does encompass all the different cultures. It really brings everyone together.
Hmm.
Music in general does that,
Yeah.
but I would say the for me the message in hip hop is the beauty of that it's just about having a good time,
Hmm.
and
And there's probably not an artistic discipline that it has not influenced: dance, visual arts,
Hmm.
literature,
yeah, yeah,
you name it, cinema, as we've
Hmm.
it's just incredible. And it allowed for movies like Posse to come out, where I think a lot of people did not realize you had the black cowboy, or what, it just wasn't in the popular. Uh,
The sad part to all of that is that quote that I heard Matt Damon said. It says, "With the victor comes the spoils, and they get to tell the story." And that's what the problem is. You won't hear the stories because the victor or that person at that time, they're
doesn't
not around to tell their story anymore.
Right.
mm,
So
Yeah.
you're going to lose a lot of culture and history because they won't let you know what actually really happened at that time.
Right. Yeah, they're going to tell you what they want,
They
or
want to tell you,
what
yes.
they. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Um, well, I want to say thank you so much. You've brought like we had kicked this idea of this episode around for 2 years, probably right when we started.
Yeah,
Almost
it
two
was
years
the
ago.
history of hip hop was always going to be one of our
But
episodes. But
but
Hmm.
I
having somebody who was there
we needed
makes it
we
makes it a real
did.
Yeah,
thing.
like I said, another shout out to Dan and Jan, House Rockin' Records, because with them and working along with them, we went to a lot of uh, gold album parties and a lot of premieres up in New York. We were there when Digital Underground performed in New York for the first time,
Wow.
doing the Humpty Dance and everything.
Yeah.
So kudos to them. And like I said, you get to see a lot of different artists, and like I said, from across the country doing what they do, going to the parties. And you just appreciate the art because, like I said, you had to come up with your own niche to make yourself popular. Because if you keep doing the same thing, it'll get old quick. But
Yeah.
that's the beauty of hip hop.
Who else did you see live back then?
Wow. Let's see. A lot of people. UTFO, Roxanne Shante. I was there at Madison Square Garden when Run DMC performed. That
Damn.
was just probably the best
That's amazing.
concert I probably ever been to. Everybody, he was like, "Take off one of your Adidas sneakers." Everybody had one Adidas sneak up in there, and they just went into my Adidas. It was probably the most
That's great.
craziest thing I have ever experienced. It was just off the hook.
That's
So, like I
beautiful.
said, it's been a lot of artists over the years, seeing a lot of people. So,
Mhm.
yeah, just to touch on a few, but yeah, that Run DMC moment, that was just
That's
wow.
awesome. I just, I just want to thank you. We could not have pulled this off without somebody of your caliber.
Well, we could have. It just would have been lamer.
It would not have been.
Awesome.
What I didn't want was just the two of us kind of name dropping and you know
talking about the couple books and documentaries.
I feel like you really took us, into that a little bit.
And like I said, you give a lot of credit to a lot of the producers and people who brought down the artists for us to see them, because that's how you got more immersed in that culture and in that era, because you got to see the artists, you got to see the Public Enemies, you got to see the EPMDs, you got to see the Rakims, the Big Daddy Kanes, and everybody, the Kumo D's, your KRS Ones, your MC Shans, and everybody. So you got to see a lot of artists perform their songs live, and they actually performed the song. So you weren't like, okay, I'm listening to somebody lip sync, because sometimes they would just go into a freestyle and you'd be like, wow, that's something they probably took out of there just to put on the albums. But this is something that they just ad-libbing right there. So that's the beauty of going to these live shows and seeing these artists live, because they'll give you a little more, or they'll bring out somebody that you didn't know that was there at the time. Because there was a group called the Main Source, and they brought out Nas and all these other artists, and you just was like, wow, this person is gonna blow up later on. And then here you go later on, you like that. I remember seeing him just coming on as they just bringing him out just to rap that day.
Give him a chance at the spotlight.
It's always beautiful to me to see somebody in full effect creativity, whether it's painting or singing, whatever, in that moment, and it's beautiful. That human expression, that's great. Well, I think we've beat this horse to death, but a great show. Do you have any parting things, Snags? Anything?
Just be sure to go to snagsandsilky.com, back up the truck, and just load up with all the merch.
Get everything.
How are we supposed to become independently wealthy?
Yes,
cats don't do that.
And we've got analytics that have us over in Europe, so we want to shout out to anybody in Europe that hears the show.
Oh, let's check real quick before we log off and just see if we got any new countries in the house here. Hold on a second.
It's hilarious. Every once in a while, we'll get some new country.
Spain and Brazil have joined the party.
So that's great.
Just a quick rundown: Spain, Brazil, Russia, Armenia, Argentina, Colombia, Belgium, Chile, Norway, Ireland, Sweden, Slovenia, Czech Republic, Canada, Finland, Germany, United Kingdom, Australia, and the United States. So worldwide audience.
And that's the culture of hip hop in a nutshell, because you got reggae funk, you got all these different artists doing it. So like I said, the genre will continue to grow as long as there's artists willing to go out and do the songs and produce the music.
Yeah.
Can't stop, won't stop.
Can't stop, won't stop. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Yeah, we got more cool shit, so stay tuned. Thanks to E for coming on. Peace out.
Deuces.